Hi everyone, this is Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. I'm going to demonstrate how to make this maple leaf pattern pot holder. So let's get started. Here's how much fabric you're going to need. You have fabric A, B, C, and D. Fabric A, which is your maple leaf, you'll need 1/8 yard. Or you can use scrap pieces of fabric to create 8 2.5-inch squares. You can use multiple colors on your maple leaf, or you can make it all one color. The background, you'll need 1/8 yard, 5 2.5-inch squares, 2 2-inch squares. Fabric C is your border, 1/8 yard. You're going to need 1 2.5-inch by 6.5-inch and 1 2.5-inch by 8.5-inch. And then your fabric D, which is the fabric on the back of the pot holder and the binding, you'll need 1/4 yard, 1 8.5-inch square, and 1 strip that is 2 3/4 by 40 inches. Cotton batting, 1/4 yard. You'll need 2 8.5-inch squares. I'm going to demonstrate a quick method of cutting out all those 2.5-inch squares quickly. What I've done is I've stacked my 2 colors I'm using for the maple leaf and the background fabric. I've cut 2.5-inch wide strips, stacked them on top. So I'm going to put my 2.5-inch line on my ruler right there on the end. And by the way, make sure this edge is cut straight down here before you start, and then cut. And then you just keep aligning your ruler up again on that 2.5-inch line on the end and cut again. And you just keep going down the row until you have some squares, enough squares cut out for your project. And just one more cut. To cut out your binding strip, an easy way of doing that is to take your fabric and put the selvage edges together. So your fabric is folded in half. So here's my folded edge right here. You're going to select a line on your cutting mat and you're going to pull the raw edges here past that line, because this is not straight. So I need to straighten that edge. So I'm lining my ruler up on a line, and you can see just how crooked my fabric is. And then use a rotary cutter. You're going to get much better results if you use a rotary cutter. Now move your ruler over 2 3/4 inches. I cut my binding a little wide because when you're making pot holders, it's so thick that it's just a little easier to get that binding wrapped around the edge. So 2 3/4 inches, and then cut. And then when you're done cutting the strip, make sure you cut these selvage edges off. After you finished cutting out your fabric, this is what you should have. Here are my squares that I'm using for the maple leaf. I'm using 2 different colors. Remember, you can use all one color or as many colors as you want in your maple leaf. Here are my background squares. Remember, there's 2 different sizes for the background. Here are my border strips right here that go around the maple leaf. A square for the back of the pot holder, cotton batting, and then a strip of fabric for the binding. Take your 2-inch background squares and turn them over onto the back, and you're going to draw a line from corner to corner. Take one of your squares for the maple leaf and then your 2 2-inch squares of background fabric. And you're going to place them on opposite corners. So place one down first, and then you're going to stitch on this side of the pencil line. Don't stitch on top of the pencil line, but right next to it. Then place your other square down in the corner. Make sure you pull this piece out of the way. And now you're going to stitch on this side of the pencil line. Remember, not on the pencil line, but very close next to it. Then you're going to cut the corners off. So put your 1/4 inch line on your stitch line, and let me find my cutter, here it is, and trim it off, then turn it, and then place your 1/4 inch line on the stitch line on the other side, and then cut it off. Fold both squares over and out, and then give it a good pressing with your iron, and then this is the stem for your maple leaf. Take 4 of your 2.5 inch background squares, and you're going to draw a line corner to corner, just like you did on those 2-inch squares. Take 4 of your background squares and 4 of your maple leaf squares. They're 2.5 inch size. Bring front sides together and line up all your edges. Then you're going to stitch right next to the line again. Now I stitched on this side, so stitch all the way across. Remember, don't stitch on top of the line, right next to it. So now you're going to cut this side off. So if you stitched on this side of the line, this would be the side you would cut off. So put your 1/4 inch line on there and go ahead and trim this side off. And then when you're done, fold it over and then press your edges. And you're going to make 4 of these. Lay out all your squares in this pattern. So you have a background up here in this top corner, and then you have half square triangles here and here, half square triangles here and here, and then your solid squares, and then your stem. Now you're going to take each row separately and stitch them together. So bring them on top, stitch a 1/4 inch seam, then bring your other one on top, stitch a 1/4 inch seam, and then go to the next row and do the same thing, and then your third row. Next step is to press all of the seams. When you are pressing your seams, you're going to press the middle row, the seams going in the opposite direction than rows 1 and 3. So let me turn these over so that you can see what I mean. Hope you can see. And this middle row here, the seams are going this way. The seams in row 1 and 3, they're going that way. So they're going this way. Okay? So you want to make sure you do it that way. After you've done your pressing, then you're going to begin stitching the rows together. So bring front sides together of the rows. And now the first thing you want to do is match your seams. So you want to make sure that the seam on the bottom is going in the opposite direction than the seam on top. And make sure you pin it to hold it, because these things do slip. So, and then make sure you pin the other one. So get it in there nice and snug. And then after you've pinned your 2 rows together, then stitch 1/4 inch seam along here. After you've done this row, then you would bring the other row on top, match the seams, place pins to hold those seams in place, and stitch a 1/4 inch seam along there. When you're done stitching the rows together, then you want to go to your ironing board and press. And this is the back side of it. And I've just taken each of these 2 seams here and I just pressed them all in one direction. Then your next step is to take your border piece for the bottom that's 6.5 inches long and bring it front sides down on the bottom edge and stitch a 1/4 of an inch. Then you're going to press this seam going in one direction, and I usually will press the seams going away from the center of the block. Bring your second border strip front side down and then stitch 1/4 inch along this edge. press this seam and then unfold it, press it on top. And again, I like to press the seam away from the center of the block. Layer everything together. Take the fabric for the back and you're going to put the front side down. The pretty side is facing down. You're looking at the back of that fabric. Then your 2 layers of cotton batting and then the top of your pot holder. Place straight pins all over the top to hold all of the layers together. Then you're going to do some stitching patterns to help hold all of the layers together. One of the easiest ones to do is just to stitch in the ditch. That's where 2 pieces of fabric come together, and this is the ditch right here, and you would stitch right in there. So you could stitch down this way, go across, and then stitch here. You could do other stitch patterns also. You could stitch going corner to corner every few inches. So you could just stitch right along this way and then turn it and then stitch in the opposite direction. One other one is to do decorative stitch patterns. If you have this stitch on your machine, this is known as the serpentine stitch. So you could go right over the seams, but you would see a wavy line. And then of course you can do the corner to corner thing also with that stitch. What's going to make it easier for you to do is to use a walking foot. This helps to prevent the layers of fabric from shifting apart and getting little tucks in your fabric that you would with a regular presser foot. It's not that you can't do it with a regular presser foot, but this one, it really makes it easy and the stitches come out much nicer. These are easy to get. You can get them at a sewing machine supply store or website, and you can also go on Amazon and get these. Enter the name of your sewing machine and the model, and that you want a walking presser foot. They're also very affordable. Take your binding strip and fold it in half and press it all the way down the full length of the strip. Then you're going to place your binding on this side first. Because we're going to make it a hanging pot holder, we're going to start right in this corner here. So you're going to place it in there like this. And then go ahead and pin it down. And I would place pins all along there, especially if you're a beginner and you're not used to sewing. I would pin things down. Then you're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch. I like to make my binding a little chunkier, so stitch 3/8 of an inch. And when you get down to the end down here, you're going to stop 3/8 of an inch from this edge here. Take it out of your machine and then turn it this way and bring the binding straight out like this. So you want to make sure that this edge is straight with this edge. And then put your finger or thumb there and fold this over like this. And then put a pin there to hold. So your fold line, see what I mean? There's a lot of layers to go through. Your fold line is even with this edge right here. So go ahead and pin this edge down, and then starting right here at this end, stitch 3/8 of an inch in from this raw edge and stitch all the way down. Now you're going to do your next 2 corners just like this one. I've already stitched around my 3rd corner. Before I stitch down this way, you want to take this piece of the binding and flip it over to the back. Okay, just turn it over, pull it over. And one thing that you want to really be careful of is the folded edge of the binding needs to be pulled past your stitch line here. Otherwise, later on, one of the next steps that we do is not going to work very well for you. So just pin this and try to have your pin down here a little bit so your presser foot doesn't have to wobble all the way over it. And then go ahead and finish stitching along this edge here, and you're going to stitch right up over this. So stitch right up over the top, and then after you got over the top, then stop. Now we're going to trim some of this binding off here at the end. So line this edge up on one of your lines on your cutting mat. Count out 4.5 inches, 1, 2, 3, 4.5, and go ahead and just cut that much of your binding off. Have your pot holder still facing up and have your binding going straight out like this. Then you're going to cut a square out of here. And you're only doing it through one layer. Do not do it through both layers. What we're trying to do is get rid of some of the bulk, some of the thickness, because this is getting really thick now. And I find by just getting rid of one layer makes the very last step that we do much easier. Go to your ironing board and press all of the seams here where the binding is. Press the binding going out away from the center of the pot holder. While you're at your ironing board, you're going to press this piece of the binding so that we can make the loop. So here is your edge down here. You're going to fold this edge here over 1/4 inch and then press it with your iron. Fold this bottom edge, this is the raw edge of the binding, fold it up and press. Then fold it in half and press. Now you're going to fold the binding all the way over to the back. Bring the folded edge of your binding past that stitch line. Okay, and you can feel it right there. So make sure you bring it past. Now let me show you how to fold your corners. Put a pin on one side and then a pin about 1.5 inches down here on the other side. Then take a straight pin, I'm going to turn this just a little bit. Take a straight pin and go on this side, press down, push in, fold over, and pin. Okay? Press down and in, fold over, and pin. Turn it over to the front, and you're going to stitch the binding down from the front side of the pot holder, and you're going to stitch in the ditch. That's where the two pieces of fabric come together. The binding meets the top of the pot holder fabric. You're not going to stitch on top of the binding, but you're going to stitch on this fabric, but very close to the binding. It's sort of a hidden stitch line because it'll just blend right in with your binding. So you're going to start in this corner, stitch down to this corner, leave your needle down, lift up your presser foot, turn your pot holder, and stitch on down to the next corner. And you're just going to keep doing that and continue stitching. Now when you get down to the last side, you're going to stitch all the way down to here. Then once you get to this corner, you're just going to turn the pot holder just slightly and begin stitching up over the top here, because you're now going to stitch all the way down to the very end here. So because you're stitching these two, this folded edge here, you're bringing those two folded edges together and stitching them closed. Then you're going to stitch across the end here, back stitch a little bit. Have the back side up. Take the end here and bring it up this way. And then like that, and pin it in place. Then at your sewing machine, you're going to just stitch a little square. So go around a couple of times, to make sure it's been reinforced, and then you're done. For other potholder projects, go to the very end of this video where you will see a green screen and then click on the links. If you like this video, would you please click on thumbs up, and don't forget to click on that share button to share it with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go to that button in the lower right hand corner of your screen. Don't forget to enter your email address and click on the little bell so you receive email notifications to your phone. I'm Cheryl, this is Manny. See you next time, and happy sewing!